have you ever been told, by your own child, that you've done nothing for them? I have. My name is Lorraine Halpern, and on a gray morning in Tacoma, my daughter looked me in the eye and erased 30 years of motherhood with one sentence. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I printed every receipt and walked out. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below, I'd love to hear from you. I don't remember what day of the week it was, but I remember the smell of burnt waffles from the oven, and Celeste's voice slicing through the hallway like a knife. Cold. Sharp. Perfectly timed, like she had rehearsed it. You've done nothing for me. I was standing at the kitchen counter, scraping the black edges off a frozen waffle I'd overtoasted, wondering if I'd have enough time to steam her dress before her final fitting. The house was full of wedding things, boxes of centerpieces, makeup trial photos taped to the fridge, a half-written seating chart on the dining table, but suddenly, all I could see was static. It wasn't just the words. It was how she said them. Like they were factual. Undeniable. Like I wasn't even in the room. I didn't move. Not at first. I didn't say anything. My fingers kept going through the motions, plate, butter, syrup, but my body felt far away, like it belonged to someone else. Like I was watching a stranger be humiliated in her own daughter's kitchen. The thing is, I wasn't eavesdropping. I wasn't snooping or meddling or pushing boundaries. I was making breakfast. That's it. That's what I'd done for the past 3 weeks since she'd asked me to come help out during the wedding prep. She'd asked me to come. She said she needed me. And yet, there it was. You've done nothing for me. It was her fiancé she was talking to, I think. They were arguing over some last-minute budget stuff. She had gone over by $5,000 on a cocktail hour upgrade, and I had gently, very gently, suggested she scale back on the champagne tower. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't scolded. I just said it might not be necessary. And in response, she painted me as dead weight. As if I'd never been there at all. I heard her footsteps as she stormed down the hallway and slammed her bedroom door. Silence folded over the apartment, like someone had pulled a curtain shut. I sat down at the kitchen table. The waffle sat untouched in front of me, steam curling up and disappearing into nothing. I didn't cry. Not then. Not yet. My eyes landed on the hydrangeas she'd ordered for the centerpieces, stacked in buckets by the window. Pale blue, almost white, like they'd been bleached by too much sun. One of them had started to wilt, the petals curling at the edges like paper left out in the rain. I stared at it like it might give me an answer. Where had I gone wrong? My mind, without permission, started opening the doors I'd spent years keeping shut. I saw her, 4 years old, burning up with fever while I sat on the bathroom floor with a cold washcloth pressed to her forehead. I saw the notice from the power company when I'd paid her tuition and skipped the electric bill. I saw the prom dress she wanted, the one I bought using a credit card I'm still paying off. And the Christmas she cried because her dad wasn't there, and I stayed up all night building a second-hand dollhouse just to give her something to hold on to. None of it was enough, apparently. And still, I said nothing. That morning, I made her coffee. I cut up fruit and left it in the fridge with a note. I called the seamstress to confirm the pickup time for her dress. I even picked up her dry cleaning. Because that's what I do. That's what mothers like me do. We show up. We shrink ourselves down to fit into whatever quiet space our children allow us to occupy. We become invisible so they can shine. But later that night, when I was lying on the pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, lazy circles, I felt something different move through me. Not rage. Not even heartbreak. Something older. Deeper. A thought whispered, quiet but undeniable. If this is how she sees me, maybe I stayed too long. That afternoon, I walked until the cold settled in my knees and the wind pushed against my coat like it knew something I didn't. I didn't have a destination, just needed to be somewhere that wasn't her apartment, with its wedding clutter and tight, silent air. I passed a grocery store, a tire shop, a place selling granite countertops. None of them registered. I just kept moving, as if walking might make the weight in my chest feel a little less unbearable. I kept thinking about her voice. The flatness in it. That offhand cruelty, tossed like a paper towel into the trash. You've done nothing for me. The words kept replaying, over and over, like an old cassette that wouldn't rewind. Was I really that kind of mother? Maybe I was too soft. Maybe I protected her too much. Maybe I should have let her figure out things on her own, fall harder, fail more. But God knows I tried. I tried every day. I stayed. I showed up. Even when I was broke. Even when I was grieving. Even when I was too tired to do anything but cry in the laundry room. I gave up more than people ever knew. I turned down the nurse manager position back in 2009 because the hours would have meant less time with her. I let the first man who wanted to take me on a cruise walk away because Celeste didn't want anyone replacing Dad. I kept birthdays going after my husband died, even when all I could afford was cake from a box and a used gift off Craigslist. I was there. I was always there. But that morning, at the kitchen table, I'd started to feel something crack open in me. And now, walking past a row of damp bus stops on 6th Avenue, I realized I wasn't sure how much more glue I had left in me. My feet stopped in front of Morning Finch Cafe without meaning to. I used to meet Marcia here sometimes on our lunch breaks from Bayview Medical. She always got the pecan scone and never finished her coffee. I hadn't seen her in months. Inside, the place looked the same dark wooden booths, same chip tile under the register. Marcia was there, sitting in her usual corner, reading something in a wrinkled paperback. She looked up when I came in, squinted, then smiled that soft, lopsided smile she had. "Well, look what the wind dragged in," she said, putting her book down. "You okay?" I must have looked worse than I thought. I nodded, sort of, and slid into the seat across from her. She didn't push. That was the thing about Marcia, she never pressed. She just signaled the barista for 2 hot teas and waited. After a while, she said, "You've always been the glue, haven't you? Even glue cracks under pressure." I almost laughed. Almost. But the words hit too close to something I hadn't admitted yet. "I don't know if I was ever glue," I said, finally. "Maybe I was just tape. Comes off easy. Leaves a mess behind." Marcia shook her head. "You've been holding things together longer than you should have had to. That's not weakness. That's wear and tear." I looked out the window. The sky had that late winter look to it, gray without rain, heavy without snow. Like it couldn't decide what to be. She sipped her tea and said, gently, "What happened?" I told her. Not everything. Just enough. Celeste's words. The way she'd said them. The way it made me feel like I was a shadow in my own story. Marcia nodded slowly, not surprised. "My son hasn't spoken to me in 5 years, she said. Said I embarrassed him. That I made everything harder by changing. He said I destroyed his idea of who I was." I blinked. I didn't know. She gave a small shrug. "You don't tell people those things unless they've earned it." Silence fell for a beat. Then she reached into the bakery box beside her and pulled out a small almond cake, wrapped in a napkin. "Here," she said, handing it to me. "You look like you need something warm. And maybe a little sweet." I didn't eat it right away. Just held it in my palm, still warm from the oven. Then she said, almost like a whisper, "Sometimes kindness starts with letting yourself hurt. That sentence stayed with me long after I'd left the cafe. Long after the almond cake had gone cold in my coat pocket. Long after the light turned gold on the sidewalk and I walked back to her apartment, not because I wanted to be there, but because I wasn't quite ready to be gone. The tension in that apartment didn't explode, it settled. Quiet and suffocating, like dust in a closed room. It clung to the walls, to the corners of our conversations. Celeste barely spoke to me after that morning. When she did, her words were brief, transactional. "Can you grab the RSVP envelopes? The florist's dropping off samples. Don't forget to sign the cake contract." "No, thank you." "No, how are you sleeping?" Just commands, tossed in my direction like paper airplanes, quick and impersonal. She moved through her days with the polished grace of someone starring in her own show, and I was background crew. A prop department she hadn't asked for but was reluctantly tolerating. One morning, she breezed into the kitchen wearing a satin robe and wireless earbuds, scrolling through Instagram while sipping a green smoothie. Without even looking at me, she said, "Don't wear anything too dark to the ceremony. It'll mess with the aesthetic." I looked up from folding the last of her linen napkins. "The aesthetic?" She finally glanced at me, like I was a misplaced coat. "Yeah. We're going for a soft blush and ivory palette. No navy or deep gray or anything funereal." I almost laughed, almost. But the way she said it, like my existence was going to throw off her color balance. Like I was a stain she had to design around. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I had nothing left in me to offer but silence. Later that day, I passed by her half-closed bedroom door and heard her talking on the phone, voice lowered just enough to sound conspiratorial. "I'm basically planning this whole thing myself," she said, light and breezy. "My mom's just there." Just there. 2 words. Soft, unthreatening words. But they hit like a slap. I stood there frozen, hands still on the doorknob to the laundry closet. She didn't know I was listening. She didn't care. Just there. That was what I'd become, an unspoken fixture. Like the lamp in the corner or the coat rack in the foyer. Something useful, but ultimately invisible. Background. That night, after she went to bed, I sat with a cup of tea I didn't want and opened my email, half out of habit. I'd meant to check on some paperwork from Bayview Medical, old retirement forms I never finished filing. But then I saw it. A subject line that made my stomach turn. Final invoice, wedding coordination, balance due $4,850, awaiting payment from Lorraine Halpern. At first, I blinked, thinking it was spam. Then I opened the thread and saw it, real, official, with headers and attached PDFs. And nestled 2 replies down, a line from Celeste. "My mom will cover this part. She knows it's important to me." No call. No conversation. No, "Hey mom, is this okay?" Just my name, tacked onto a price tag I never agreed to pay. I didn't rage. That's the strange part. The anger didn't come like fire. It came like water, cold, creeping, spreading slowly through my ribs, soaking everything I thought was still intact. I sat there a long time, the screen glowing in the dark, casting faint light across the kitchen tile. My hands stayed still, curled around a chipped mug. I didn't feel shocked. Not anymore. Just hollowed out. I thought of the second shifts I took during flu season. The holidays I skipped to cover ER rotations so I could stash away money for her SAT prep. The way I always picked up when she called, even if I was bone-tired and halfway through dinner. The loan she never repaid. The birthday she forgot. The way I made sure her fridge was full every time I visited, because I couldn't stand the idea of her going without. I had never kept a tally. But that night, something inside me whispered, maybe you should've. I got up and went to the guest room, pulled open the bottom drawer of the nightstand. Inside were years of paper I'd kept without knowing why, tax returns, medical records, school transcripts, utility bills from when she lived at home and couldn't find work. I pulled them out, one by one, and laid them across the bed. Tuition. Co-pays. The birth certificate with the smudged thumbprint. Her 5th grade essay about wanting to be just like my mom. I thought, briefly, of writing her a letter. A well-worded one. Something sharp enough to pierce the armor she'd built around herself. I even started. Celeste, I want you to understand. But the words sat wrong. I crumpled the paper, tossed it in the trash. She wouldn't read it. And if she did, she wouldn't hear it. She didn't need a monologue. She needed the math. The proof. The cold, unpolished truth of what it took to raise a daughter who now said I had done nothing. So I kept collecting. Grocery receipts from her vegan phase. Photos she'd left behind in boxes. The email I'd printed when she got her first scholarship, and the refund notice when she dropped out of that program 2 months later. I wasn't trying to overhear. I was just in the hallway, folding a fleece blanket that had slipped off the couch sometime in the afternoon. One of those small domestic gestures that used to mean something. That used to say, I'm here. I care. I see the mess and clean it up without being asked. Her bedroom door was cracked. Just a sliver. But enough. I heard her voice, low and even, no sharp edges. After the wedding, she's going back to her place. I'm not dealing with that guilt trip stuff anymore. My hands froze around the blanket. I held it there like it might shield me from the words. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't venting. That would have been easier, in a way. This wasn't a daughter in the middle of a tantrum. This was a woman making plans, clean, controlled, and thoroughly rid of me. And the way she said guilt trip stuff, like my very presence was manipulative, like simply being her mother was some performance meant to win sympathy or center attention, it lodged somewhere deep in my chest. I stood there a while longer, listening to her talk about honeymoon flights and RSVP drama and how the seating chart was basically a hostage negotiation. She was laughing. Happy, even. She didn't sound conflicted. She sounded relieved. That night, I didn't go back to the apartment right away. I texted her I was grabbing dinner, then walked until my legs began to ache. I ended up, almost without realizing, at Morning Finch Cafe again. The place had become a sort of liminal space for me, neither home nor away. Just somewhere quiet where the world didn't expect anything. Marcia was already there, stirring a sugar packet into her chamomile like she'd been waiting for me all along. We sat outside, under those dim string lights that buzzed faintly in the evening air. The chairs still scraped too loudly, and the mismatched mugs were always a little chipped, but I liked it there. It felt like a place where nothing had to be perfect to belong. I slid the manila envelope onto the table. It was thicker than last time. Inside, co-pay receipts, the 3rd grade report card where Celeste had scribbled "I love you, Mommy" in pink gel pen, and a photocopy of a rent check I'd covered her senior year when she lost her job and didn't tell me for 2 weeks. I'm not trying to guilt her, I said, my voice low. I'm really not. I don't want to disappear. Marcia didn't say anything at first. She just watched me, eyes soft but steady. Then she said, "You look like a woman standing at the edge of something." I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek. I've been thinking maybe I shouldn't give it to her. The envelope, I mean. Maybe I'm being petty. Maybe this is just some long-winded tantrum in disguise. You're not petty, she said. You're grieving. The word caught me off guard. Grieving what? She took a slow sip of tea before answering. The version of her you carried in your heart. The one who still needed you. The one who saw you. I blinked back the sting in my eyes. Looked away toward the corner of the patio, where a group of college kids were laughing over shared fries and noisy anecdotes. One of them knocked over a chair, and the metal leg scraped the concrete with a screech. I barely flinched. I can survive being resented, I said. But being erased? I don't know how to recover from that. You don't, she said quietly. You stop asking for space in a house that's already decided where you don't belong. That landed hard. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. It wasn't a fight anymore. It wasn't even a misunderstanding. It was an erasure. And I was the only one who could stop it. I thanked her for the tea, kissed her cheek, and walked the 6 blocks to the Tacoma Public Library. The sky was that kind of purple that only shows up right before night takes over completely. The sidewalks were mostly empty. The town quiet, but not still. Like it was holding its breath. Inside, the library smelled like paper and lemony floor wax. The back computer lab buzzed with the low hum of old desktops, most of them sleeping. I picked one near the window, logged in, and inserted the USB drive I'd been carrying for days. I opened the folder labeled Proof. There they were. Scanned forms. Photocopied bills. Birthday cards. A picture of Celeste at 7 in a Halloween costume I stayed up all night sewing because the store-bought one didn't feel magical enough. Each file, a thread in a tapestry no one else had ever bothered to look at. I selected all of them. Clicked Print All. The machine stirred to life, slow at first, then steady. Paper slid out in rhythm, warm and curling slightly at the corners. Page after page of proof that I had been there. That I had mattered, even if no one remembered. The papers were everywhere. Spread across the carpet, sliding off the table, draped over the back of the couch like pieces of skin shed from a life lived too quietly. Tuition receipts, dental bills, after-school programs, inhaler prescriptions, ballet registration forms with doodles in the corners. Some were yellowed and delicate, the ink faded like breath. Others still smelled faintly of printer toner. I sat cross-legged in the middle of it all, the manila envelope half open beside me like a mouth that had spilled everything it had swallowed over the years. I didn't touch anything at first. I just looked. Let my eyes fall across the numbers, the scribbled notes, the school letterheads, the balance due stamps in red. It was like staring at fossils, proof that something had been here. That I had been here. A thought nagged at me, is this what bitterness looks like? Was I trying to shame her? Was I reaching backward with both hands, dragging the past into the present just to throw it at her feet like broken dishes? I hated the question. Hated the doubt it brought with it. But then, just as it had every day since she said it, I heard her voice again, unshaken, almost bored. You've done nothing for me. That sentence had carved a hollow in me. A line that echoed not because it was loud, but because it was final. Nothing. Not you've disappointed me, or we don't understand each other, but nothing. A word that left no air behind it. I reached for a worn folder, the kind with a paper fastener and little circle holes punched down the side. Inside was a report from when she was 7. Psychological screening after her father died. Notes scribbled in careful blue ink. I remembered sitting in the waiting room while she clutched a stuffed turtle, biting her lip. At the bottom, one line stood out like it had been waiting for me all these years. Strong maternal support is evident. I read it twice, then a third time. Even strangers had seen it. Next, I found something heavier. A cloth-covered album, pale green with a satin ribbon looped through the spine. I hadn't opened it in years. I don't even remember the last time I thought about it. Maybe I buried it on purpose. Maybe I knew it would hurt too much to look. But tonight, I opened it anyway. First page, Celeste at 5. Arms flung wide, cheeks sticky, standing in front of a lopsided cake. I remember that birthday. We couldn't afford candles, so I used tongue depressors and drew flames on them with orange Sharpie. She laughed like it was the cleverest thing she'd ever seen. I had taken that picture while holding the camera with one hand and balancing a juice box with the other. The next page, Halloween, 2nd grade. I'd sewn her costume by hand because she hated the itchy fabric of store-bought ones. She was a dragon that year. We stayed up until midnight cutting scales from green felt and gluing sequins one by one. Page after page, memories spilled out. Summer road trips in a beat-up Corolla, sleeping in borrowed tents. The time she won the spelling bee and cried because she didn't like the attention. A letter she wrote in 6th grade that said, "You are the bravest mom in the world." I had forgotten so much. But the album hadn't. And suddenly I saw it all for what it was, not a collection of sentimental scraps, but a ledger. Not of money. Not even of time. But of care. Of showing up. Of staying. And I realized something that felt both painful and liberating. I hadn't lived a life of my own. Not really. I had bent myself around her needs, day by day, year by year. Folded corners of myself to make room. Pushed dreams aside not with resentment, but with the quiet conviction that mothers are supposed to. But motherhood is not supposed to make you disappear. And now that I had disappeared, there was nothing left to protect. So I stood. My knees ached from the floor. I gathered the album carefully, placed it in the box beside the stack of bills and forms. Added the kindergarten drawing that read, "My mommy is a superhero," in shaky pink crayon. Tucked in the grief counseling brochure I'd taken after her father's funeral, the one I never told her about. And then, I picked a card from the kitchen drawer. Cream-colored, simple. A single gold leaf on the front. Inside, I wrote, "This is what nothing looks like." No signature. No flourish. Just the truth, inked steady and clear. I placed it on top and closed the lid. It sat on the counter for a long time after that. Like a sealed truth. Like a box of bones waiting to be buried or revealed. I didn't knock. I used the spare key she gave me on my first day there, still hanging on the chipped red keychain shaped like a coffee mug that read "World's Best Mom." The irony wasn't lost on me. The apartment was quiet in that muffled, expensive way. Like even the air had been curated. I heard Celeste's voice floating from the living room. She was on the phone, walking in slow loops between the coffee table and the window. "Yes," I confirmed the florist. "No, the seating chart's done." "Mom?" "She's here, I guess. Somewhere." She didn't look up. Just gave a quick, dismissive flick of her hand toward the kitchen, like I was a delivery person who'd overstayed their welcome. I walked past her and placed the box on the dining table. I didn't slam it. I didn't even set it down hard. I placed it gently, like it was something that might bruise if handled roughly. Because in a way, it was. It held a quiet kind of weight, not loud, not flashy. Just real. She turned around just as I took a seat across from the box. Her expression flickered, first surprise, then that familiar frown of annoyance settling between her eyebrows. "What's this?" she asked, still clutching her phone. "Is this another guilt package?" I folded my hands in my lap. Took a breath. "I thought you deserved to see what you called nothing." She ended the call with a quick thumb swipe, then walked over like she was bracing for some kind of dramatic scene. She opened the box and pulled out the first thing her fingers found, a kindergarten progress report. I saw the hesitation in her brows as she read the teacher's comment, curious, bright, very attached to her mother. Then came the photo of her playing her first violin, teeth missing, socks mismatched. Then the hospital copay from when she broke her arm falling off the monkey bars. My name written at the top in urgent, rushed handwriting, mine. Her hands moved faster now, flipping through the contents like she wanted it over with. A Girl Scout sash. A summer camp packing list. My night shift pay stubs, still creased, the ink fading. She paused longer at the thank you letter from her college advisor. Thank you for advocating for Celeste during a difficult financial stretch. Your support made all the difference. I watched her jaw tighten. Then she shoved the letter back into the pile. This is manipulative, she said. Her voice was sharper now, but her posture gave her away. One shoulder slightly curled inward. Arms crossed, but not high and angry, lower, almost like defense. No, I said, quiet but steady. This is memory. Yours. Mine. What you don't remember, I still carry. She didn't respond right away. Her eyes moved toward the wall, avoiding mine. I never asked you to do all of that, she finally said. I know, I replied. That's what makes it love. The silence that followed was heavy, not explosive, but absolute. It settled into the room like fog, filling up the corners, humming low beneath the ceiling fan's soft whir. I stood. My knees ached slightly, the way they always do when I sit too long. I brushed my palms down the front of my jeans, smoothing nothing in particular, just grounding myself. I stayed longer than I should have, I said. Not because I was needed, but because I was afraid no one else would see me. Her eyes flicked up then. Brief. Sharp. Then gone again. I didn't wait for permission or forgiveness. That wasn't what I had come for. I reached down, picked up my purse from the floor, and looped it over my shoulder. The same purse I'd carried through hospitals, recitals, PTA meetings, and funeral homes. The leather was cracked in places, the zipper pull worn smooth from years of use. I didn't look back. I didn't say goodbye. I left the box right where it sat, among the wedding RSVPs and blush pink napkin samples. Let her decide what to do with it. Let her decide what any of it meant. The door clicked shut behind me with the gentleness of an ending that didn't need noise to be final. And as I walked down the hallway, heels tapping soft and certain against the wood floors, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. The box was still on her table when I closed the door behind me. I didn't hear her call after me. I didn't expect to. That part of the story had already played out. The rest, whatever it was going to be, wasn't mine to direct anymore. I walked to my car slowly, the kind of slow that comes not from reluctance, but from release. That strange pace your body finds when it doesn't have to brace anymore. Each step felt lighter than it should have, and heavier than I wanted it to. Like grief and grace sharing the same breath. The sun was dropping, casting that amber wash over everything. Even the cracked sidewalk and oil-stained curb looked soft under it. It was the kind of light that made the world look more forgiving than it really was. The kind that made you think maybe you'd survived something. I opened the car door, slid into the seat, and shut it with a click that sounded quieter than I expected. I gripped the wheel with both hands. Not out of nerves, out of habit. The engine started on the first try, smooth and familiar. I sat there for a moment, not moving. Just letting the quiet hold me. No shouts behind me. No final words. No chase. And in that silence, something inside me finally settled. Not joy, not yet. But something steadier. Like I'd stepped outside a storm and was still learning how to breathe in clean air again. My chest felt hollow in a different way, emptied, but not broken. I didn't check the rearview mirror. I already knew what was behind me. And I didn't need to carry it forward anymore. The drive across town felt longer than usual, not because of traffic, but because I noticed every red light, every cracked crosswalk, every neighbor's porch light turning on. Like the world hadn't changed at all, but I had. Willow Creek Apartments sat behind a line of cedar trees that shook gently in the wind. Modest buildings. Brown brick. Nothing fancy. But the windows were warm, and the place smelled like someone had cooked something with garlic not too long ago. Marcia was standing outside when I pulled up, cardigan sleeves pulled over her hands, hair loose around her face. "You drove slow," she called. I stepped out, locking the car behind me. "I wasn't in a hurry." "Good. That means you did it right." She didn't ask how it went. Didn't need to. That's the gift of a friend who knows where your silences live. She walked ahead, let me follow. Inside, the apartment was just as I remembered, full of thrifted furniture and houseplants that somehow thrived despite the gloom of Tacoma skies. A place stitched together with care, not display. My room was on the left. Small, but clean. A twin bed with a blue quilt, a bookshelf with a few paperbacks, and a white vase of tulips on the window ledge. Yellow ones. My favorite. I touched one of the petals lightly. It felt real, cool and soft and alive. "You remembered," I said, quietly. "I remember everything," Marcia replied from behind me. "Even the things you think people forget." I smiled, or something close to it. I unpacked slowly. Just a weekend bag. 2 changes of clothes. A notebook. My old wallet. And one photograph, tucked between a t-shirt and my brush. I pulled it out and looked at it in the soft lamplight. Celeste, maybe 4, curled asleep on my chest. Her thumb in her mouth. My face slack with exhaustion, mouth slightly open, one arm cradling her like muscle memory. That kind of closeness you can't recreate, only remember. I didn't cry. I didn't ache. I found a small nail in the wall between the window and the closet. Hung the photo there. Straightened it. Stepped back. Not a shrine. Not a monument. Just a reminder. That I had loved. And that I had given that love freely. Not because it was always returned, but because it was who I was. Later, we sat on the couch with mugs of mint tea, watching the sky turn from orange to blue to deep, settled gray. Marcia told me about a painting class she was thinking of joining. I told her I might take a train somewhere, just for the view. We didn't talk about the wedding. We didn't need to. That chapter had closed. And in its place, something else was growing. Not a second chance. Not a dramatic rebirth. Just the quiet miracle of peace. The wedding came and went. I didn't go. I didn't need to explain it to anyone. Not to the neighbors who asked if I was traveling. Not to the nurse from Bayview who called to wish me well. Not even to Marcia, who already knew without asking. A week later, my phone buzzed while I was chopping carrots. It was a text from Celeste. "I wish you'd been there. Hope you're okay." That was it. No apology. No reflection. Just a sentence floating in that space between silence and recognition. A vague hand reaching out, more for her comfort than mine. I stared at it for a moment. Then put the phone down and kept chopping. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed with my old journal. I hadn't touched it in years, but the spine still cracked the same way when I opened it. I wrote in soft ink, slower than usual. I was always there. You just didn't look. And I closed the book like closing a door that no longer needed to stay open. A few days after that, Nancy, an old friend from the hospital, sent me a photo from the wedding. Celeste in her gown, surrounded by her bridesmaids, beaming under a cascade of flowers. There was a space beside her that looked empty. She must have noticed it too, because I heard later from someone that she told guests I had a schedule conflict. In another conversation, she said we were working through something. I didn't bother correcting the narrative. Let them think what they want. Let her say what she needs to. It's funny how people twist things to make themselves more comfortable. The truth doesn't need defending anymore. Not from me. One afternoon, Marcia and I sat out on the porch with cups of mint tea. The sun filtered through the trees just right, casting shadows that looked like lace across the floorboards. She told me she was thinking of taking a watercolor class at the senior center. You should come with me, she said, nudging my elbow. I don't paint, I replied. You didn't used to sit still either. Look at you now. We laughed, the kind of quiet laugh that comes from understanding, not from jokes. The breeze was light, the kind that made you believe maybe everything really would be okay. I told her I'd been thinking about taking a train trip. Not far. Just to Portland or maybe even San Luis Obispo. Somewhere I could sit by the window and watch the landscape move without having to steer. Sounds like a good place to be still, she said. That night, I stood by the window in my room, looking at the photo of me and Celeste from when she was a child, the one I'd hung when I moved in. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel broken. I felt settled. Not because she had changed. Not because I'd been vindicated. But because I'd stopped waiting for her to see me. I had seen myself. I walked over and touched the edge of the frame. Just a fingertip. Just long enough to whisper a goodbye that wasn't full of bitterness. I sat down on the bed and pulled the blanket over my legs. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet I once feared, and now felt lucky to have. I'm not the kind of mother people write poems about. I'm not the woman who always says the right thing, or who was loved the way she loved others. But I was there. I gave what I had. And now, I give the rest to myself. I'm no longer the mother someone needs me to be. Or the woman someone expects. I'm just me. And as it turns out, that's enough. You know, I used to think that motherhood meant staying, no matter what. That if you loved hard enough, long enough, it would be seen. Be felt. But sometimes, it isn't. And the hardest part of getting older isn't the wrinkles or the quiet house, it's learning to let go of the story you thought you'd be part of, and still finding peace in your own chapter. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting either. I'm just here. Breathing softer. Standing lighter. Maybe you've been there too, giving more than you had, loving without keeping score. If you have, I hope you know that love still matters. Even if no one claps for it. Even if it's never named. And if this story found you at the right time, I hope you'll join me again sometime. There are more stories where this came from, and maybe one of them is a little like yours.